The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Today is Friday, September 11th, 2020. Thanks so much for joining me. It is the 19th anniversary of the attacks on the United States on September 11th, 2001. I remember exactly where I was. But this year is a little different for me because normally I do pause for a moment of reflection on the gravity of that moment, the lives that were lost on that day, as well as the lives that were lost because of the decisions of our country to go and take us into war with a nation that had nothing to do with it, while we are still friends with the nation that had the most to do with it. I normally do take time to commemorate, but it's different this year because I have a hard time joining in the commemoration with people who want us to pause and reflect every year over the loss of 3,000 plus lives, but really haven't batted an eye at the fact that we've lost 195,000 Americans. Clearly, not all lives matter. Clearly, not all lives matter. This is not a reflection on the significance of what happened to this country. I don't reflect on that moment because of any sense of patriotism or nationalism, because of how patriotism and nationalism was weaponized to kill nearly 1 million Iraqis. But I do pause and reflect on the lives of the people who were lost, because they're humans, they're people. They were mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, husbands, wives, children. And so I pause and I reflect on their lives, but not their lives in the context of America's nationalistic narrative. Because America is showing us in 2020 that clearly not all lives matter. It matters how those lives can be weaponized. It matters because these 195,000 Americans who have died as a result of the coronavirus and the decisions of this administration, they cannot be weaponized for their political ends. In fact, the truth is a weapon itself against this administration. And because the truth is a weapon in and of itself against this administration, they have to downplay the significance of those lives. And because of that, I cannot join in with this performative concern for human life, which is nothing more than a political tool and a tool that led us into war. Needless war. Unfounded, unjust war. So I'm finding myself having to parse the difference between what I feel for the people who lost their lives because they were real. And if all lives actually mattered to these people that I'm talking about, then they will feel that same emotional distress for the 195,000 Americans who have died from COVID-19. They would feel that same distress for them as they pretend to have today for the 3,000 plus Americans who died on 9/11. Today exposes the performative nature of our humanity here in this country, the performative nature of our emotions in this country. It's all a performance for political ends. Because if you can find yourself tearing up about 3,000 Americans who died 19 years ago, then you should be a complete mess in shambles over the 195,000 Americans who have died because of the negligence of this country and the negligence of this president. But they won't shed a tear for them. They cannot shed a tear for them. Because if they shed a tear for them, then they would have to go to the next logical step, which is how do we prevent more deaths? And you can't ask that question without addressing how we got here. And you can't answer that question of how we got here without all roads pointing in two very similar directions: Donald Trump and greed. American greed. It's what's demanding that we open up, that bars open up, that restaurants open up, that gyms open up. But it's not just greed. I have to add a third component. It's Donald Trump as the leader of this country who knew what was happening, who knew the severity, but didn't care and played it down. It's the greed of this capitalistic system. But it's also the overwhelming amount of ignorance that is passed off as wokeness in this country. People who are so woke that they don't believe that they can catch the virus because they think the virus is a hoax. All of these are seamlessly intertwined. One plays off the other. Donald Trump fed into this, but this also fed into Donald Trump, and all of it revolves around the greed and capitalism, the desire to keep these quarterly profit margins going. And as a result, we did not do what was necessary to prevent. Probably 160,000 of those deaths could have been prevented. But everybody wants us to pause and reflect today and to conjure up the same nationalism and the same patriotism that we had on September. I remember the nationalism that I felt. I remember driving down the road and seeing people in pickup trucks waving American flags and thinking that day, I'm like, God bless America. But isn't it funny how those same trucks are driving around the country today with those same American flags, and they are a threat to our lives today? They are out there killing us in the streets because we dare to challenge this system to stop killing black lives. Yeah, we had a moment of solidarity in 2001, but that solidarity was exploited. And because of that, we are where we are now. We are where we are now. Our chickens have come home to roost. We thought our chickens coming home to roost was 9/11. But we have done more damage to ourselves as a nation than Al-Qaeda, than the Taliban, than ISIS, than any threat. Any threat that we have mobilized against, and we have spent trillions of dollars to try to put down in the Middle East. We have waged endless wars. None of those threats could compare to the complete absurdity of our own American arrogance. We have killed more of our own than any terrorist ever could. So who is the real threat to this country? What should we be remembering and mourning today? We must mourn our own American arrogance, because it is ultimately the only thing that can successfully destroy us.